exactly, but we're going to now drill down a little deeper into exactly where that area was. So Zok the Helig Gemara. Just X this out.
On the different views, you can see that.
So Zok the Gemara.
Can you hear you?
I didn't do an audio check, but I'm going to assume that the other can hear me, but I'll do an audio check. Testing, 1, 2, 3.
Very loud and clear.
Oh, thank you. Gewaltig. So Zok the Heilige Gemara. We were looking at Heichen Chut HaShedra, where 6 lines from the bottom on Mem Hey Amud Beis. At Heichen Chut HaShedra. Until when does the Chut HaShedra extend? And what's important about that is we learned that Nifsika Chut HaShedra, the animal is going to be a treifa. At what point is the Shedra no longer a Shedra? Amar Yehuda Amar Shmuel ad bein haproshes. There's different pshatim in the Rishonim in what this means, but the pashas that we're learning is there's nerves or sinews that come out of the animal, and there's 3 nerves that come out, one after the other. Rashi says 2 etzbois apart. Then they come together and they join into one big sinew, and then they go down the thigh and the leg of the animal. So this, where these 3 sinews come out, that's right at the end, right near where the hip bone is, where the legs connect. And the justification is that south of that, closer to the tail, all that will become paralyzed. If it breaks is the tail. But the most important thing is that the hind legs will still work and that the animal will be able to walk. So it's bein precious. Rabdimi bar Yitzchak have a kaboy lemezel lebeichazoi. He wanted to go to Beichazoi, and there's a very good video on it from Aldaf that where the Shechet explains in great detail which bone it is and exactly where it is. But anyway, Rabdimi bar Yitzchak have a kaboy lemezel lebeichazoi. He wanted to go to Beichazoi. Also, Rabbi Yehuda. He met Rabbi Yehuda. Amalei, he told him, Lech v'limar ben haproshes. Please show me where it is. You see, not only did we need aids and we need books and we need videos, they needed it too. But they didn't have videos, so they needed to see it where it was. Hecha, where it is. Amalei, he told him, Zil aiseli gedi. Go bring me a gedi, v'ach v'lach, and I will show you. Aiseli gedi shemena. He brought him a nice fat goat. Amarlei belia tfei veloy yedia. It's very covered up with fat, and I'm not able to see where it is. And I think I saw that the animal was alive, and he wanted to show him on the outside where it is. It's similar to when you get a blood test and they're looking for your veins and they can't find them. They do that to you too, and they feel and they squeeze and they try to find veins, and they ask me, "Are you human? Do you really have veins?" And then they dig and they kratz. So these sinews are too deep in the animal, covered over with fat. I'm not able to see them. Isolate kachashu. He brought a really thin one. Since the animal has no fat, then the sinews are pressed up against the hip bone and they're getting depressed. So I can't feel their bump outside. You need an animal that's not too fat and not too thin. Amarle, so he told him, Gemara, I will teach you. Hachi Omar Shmuel, Ad Achas Treifa, up until the first place where these sinews split out to the right and to the left, that's treifa. If the spinal cord gets severed there, the animal is a treifa. Shlishis If it's by the third one, it's kshera. The question is shnia in the middle, exactly where the demarcation point is. Eini yoidea. That I don't know. So that is the shaila anywhere between the first and the third. The question is that a treifa or not? Boy Rav Huna Bereid Rav Yeshua. Rav Huna Bereid Rav Yeshua had the following shaila. Is it ad va'ad b'chlal? Do you say up until the first one it's vade treifa? Does that mean even extending into that place where it branches off? Oh, thank you so much. I promised to get out a price to one of my vendors before Monday morning, so I had to be up late. So how much need is to keep me up, but I got the price. Oh, so ad v'ad b'chlal, oidoma ad v'lo ad b'chlal. So do you say that it's even including that place where the two veins branch off on either side? Is that junction point? Is that junction point included in what's vaday treif? Or do we say ad v'lo ad b'chlal, up until the junction point is vaday treif, south of that, it's already besophic? Because we know from the first until the third, it's a suffix, but is it north or south of that junction? Boyra papa, imtim taloimer ad v'lo ad b'chlal. If you're going to get lakula means right before you hit those three branches, right before you hit the first branch, that's where it's treifa. But further down, it's not treifa. What would be halachas pi parsha mahu? What about right in that branch? What if you cut it right where the veins open up on either side? As Rashi says, imtim saloimer ad v'lo ad b'chlal pi parsha mahu nivzik achut hagadol Keneged pihap Chullin harishonim. Right at that joint, right in the middle of the joint, right? The joint is not kachut asayra. The joint is, let's say, quarter of an inch in diameter. The diameter of the sinew, maybe even larger. So in that area, the mokim pitzel mao. Do you say b'chlal treifahu? Is it b'chlal treifa? Oy b'chlal eina yodeyahu. Is it considered north of that first point, or is it south of that first point? Mi'aminan ad bein dafka. Maybe when you say ad v'loy ad b'chlal, it doesn't mean ad till before the two branches spread off on either side. Maybe it means at that point. So maybe a little bit in there, a little bit in the opening of either side. Maybe that would also be part of the spinal cord. Or maybe it literally means right before it even splits off. That's where the loyad bechlal ends, and therefore once you're beina parsha, it won't be a treif. Boy Rabbi Yirmiyah, let's look at a shaila on the opposite end of the spectrum. If you're going to say ad va'ad b'chlal, meaning it even includes that first parsha, so the parsha atzmamahu. So at first glance, this doesn't make sense, because if it's ad va'ad b'chlal, then we know what the parsha is. That parsha would make it a treifa. Zokt Rashi, imtim saloim ad v'ad b'chlal, lekalami boy be a piyah parsha. You can't say that's the shaila, like we said earlier. Midi devada treifa. That's for sure treifa. Tafilu chut shechneged hefsek shebein shtei psulm treifa. Even if you go a little bit past there, it's going to be treifa. The choshkein pizza rishon. Surely, if you cut it exactly where the two branches branch off at that junction point. This is what the shaila is. The question is if you hold ad vad b'chlal, that central stalk is part of the chut hashedra. What if that chut hashedra wasn't cut, but you cut off one of the side branches? What if you cut off one of the side branches? Would that also make a treifa ubeparsha rishoina? And the question that we're discussing is by that first joint, by that first junction. Zok the Heilige Gemara. Tashma. Maybe we could bring a raya. I don't know how to read. Is it a parsha? Is it a frasha? A pirsha? How's it?
Parasha.
Haparasha? Tashma haparasha, tiden kabasar. That you could treat like it's regular meat. Maila, parasha rishoina ushniya. That you can consider like regular meat. So that'll tell you that if you cut off one of the sides, it's like regular meat. So Gemara, loy shlishish. It means the third one is kabasar. Because we already know the third one is vadai not treif. So I just learned it the way Rashi learned it, but there's another Shita who learned that these three parashos are referring to much further south in the animal, or if the animal's hanging from its legs, further north, further towards the back of the animal, and there's a bone that has like little ribs that come out of it, and we're talking about between the ribs. I didn't have clarity in what that other pshat was, but there is another pshat in this Gemara. But I think we don't like Rashi.
They're arguing with this.
No, they're arguing where the place is. They're not talking about the three gidden that come out, the three sinews that come out that join and form to get a nosha. It's talking about a completely different thing. It's talking about a place that has like ribs coming out, and it's the meat in between the ribs themselves. There's like two more shots of the meat in between the ribs themselves at a further point down the animal. Even though there's no more ribs down there, maybe there's certain protrusions that come out. I don't know. Rabbi Yanai says, what about in a bird? Where does the spinal cord end in a bird? Rabbi Yanai Omer, lamata min agam, below the wings. Now, what that means, we don't have anything in Rashi here, but there's actually a machlokas for showing him what that means. Does that mean from below where the wings connect to the spinal cord, which would be way up, or does it mean the bottom of the wings? It doesn't mean until past the wings. It means up until the middle of the wings. Again, does this mean ad bein agafim, up until the middle of where that joint is, where they join the spine, or does it mean the end of the bird? So
the two boys that we asked, that we never answered them, right?
those were not answered. So we go. Rashi says, I believe. So we go to Chumar. Rashi usually says, by all of these, here he doesn't. But by all of these shilas, Rashi always says, we go to Chumar. Let me see if I can find the bird that we're talking about. Okay, here we go. So I'm just going to share with you the pictures over here. So these are those three big nerves that are coming out of the spine, and they join and go down and become part of the Geranosha. So that's what we were discussing. So the last shot that we had was if this cut off, would that make it a treifa? The other questions were if it was cut right before here or cut after here. Those were those shilas. There are those who learned that we're speaking about the whole area that's further down the spine, but all this would for sure be treifa. Yeah. Now, what is unique, which is what you mentioned today, is that one of the questions they ask on Rashi is you talk about three sinews that come out. All along the spine, there's stuff coming out of the spine. That's how it's communicating to command and control center. That's how it's communicating with the whole body. So what's the deal with these three? There's so many. So Belsky said that the way those other pipes are connected is very different from the way this is connected. Those are clearly side branches, but they're not. Maybe they're talking to the spinal cord, but they're definitely not part of the spinal cord. What's unique about these three is that after these three, the spinal cord gets noticeably thinner, which would tell us that it's no longer a spinal cord. Now it's just like another branch, but it's a branch that's connected to the end of the spinal cord. Okay, now when it comes to a bird, he has an illustration. I think he has a diagram as well. So when you have, but the bird, this is its wing. Okay, its wing is not connected to the spine over here. It's connected to another bone that connects to the spine further down. So that's what the question is. Is it till past where it connects, or is it above where it connects? Now there's those who hold that when the wing is lying flat against the animal, that's what we're referring to, which would be a little bit further down. So here it's illustrating it a little bit more clearly how it connects. He doesn't have a diagram. Some of the Gemaras have a diagram. Okay, perfect. Sagt der Heilige Gemara weiter. Now, I believe, I think he quotes from the Ramah, I don't have it right in front of me, that we paskin that at the point of connection to the bird, south of there is going to be not a problem of treifa, but I think he says that if you could be machmer, since by oif not have to move, if you could be machmer and require that it shouldn't have a chut shedder that was nivsak down to where the end of the wings are, that would be better. So Zok to Gemara, underneath from where they connect, until where they connect. I was in front of Ben Pazi. They brought an oif for him to check. He was checking the spinal cord very carefully from the head, going down, making his way down till he got to Ben Akafim. Now at that point, he suddenly got a message. He got a message that he was being summoned to the Beinisia. So he stopped what he was doing and he left. And I'm not sure had he finished making his bedika yet. Did he stop there and leave to the base nasi right away because he finished checking and he held that you only have to check up until that connection, but not the connection itself, meaning that he paskins like Reish Lakish. Or maybe he was still in the middle of checking, but he had to stop because he had to respond immediately to the nasi summons. So I don't know what he was passing. Nitla kaved, if the liver was removed. Frag to Gemara, our Mishnah says v'loy nishtayr himena klum, then it will be a treifa. Ha, zok the Gemara will be medayik. Nishtayr himena klum will be kshera. We already had this stira. I mean, we had shnei meroiv alibud Rabbi Yochanan. Zok the Gemara because Rabbi Yochanan paskin kazais and Rabbi Yochanan paskin stam Mishnah. So we had a steer there. So here the Gemara is analyzing it again. Zok the Gemara alpha gav deliver kazais. We could be medayik that it's going to be kosher. Ivatnan in the later Mishnah we can learn nitala kaved v'nishtayr himena kazais is kshera. So it's mashmi you need to have at least a kazayis. Rabbi Yosef like kasha. Ha Rab Chia, ha Rab Shimon by Rabbi. There's a machlokes between Rab Chia and Rab Shimon by Rabbi. One of them holds you need a kazayis of the liver in order for it to regenerate, and the other one holds even a mashu of the liver will regenerate. Who holds what? We are going to see in a moment. Ki had Rab Chia zarikla. Rab Chia, if he had such a scenario where it was not nishtayr kazayis, he would throw it out. So that would tell us right off the bat that Rab Chia is the one who's makbid on the kazayis, right? But Rab Shimon bar Rebbe matbil ba, he was toivel with it, and he ate it. So therefore he holds even a mashu would regenerate itself. The simanech and the siman that you have to know who says what is Rab Shimon bar Rebbe was a gvir. Simanach Ashirim Mekamson. Ashirim, they don't throw things out. They appreciate every little penny. So therefore, they're not gonna throw it out because it's less than the kazayis remaining. He's gonna be matir. But Reb Chia was a poor man, so he was more makbid, and he's a dafka if there is a kazayis. My question: how does it help you? How am I going to remember who was rich? The Tedrash looks
But maybe he just loved liver. So even if he had a little piece, like it's even the crumbs of the bottom of the potato bag.
I'm happy you asked that question. How did you understand when I translated the words "Kehad Rab Chia Sarikla"? I'm teaching through what away?
This piece.
No, I'm saying Rab Chia would throw away an animal and consider it a treifa if it didn't have a kazayis of its liver remaining, while Rab Shimon by Rebbe would be moderate, and if you had a behemoth where it had even less than the kazayis remaining, Reb Shimon would eat the animal. I know. I'm about to tell you the second Pshat of Rashi. That was the first Pshat of Rashi. The second Pshat of Rashi says it doesn't make sense what I just said now. Why? Because it should have said Reb Chia is asers and Reb Shimon is matir. Zokter, we're talking about a healthy liver. Reb Chia Zarkler, Reb Chia didn't like liver. He threw out the whole liver. He didn't eat liver. Reb Chia didn't eat liver at all. Reb Shimon Barav Matbil, he liked liver. I don't know if he liked it. He ate it maybe even though he didn't like it because he didn't throw out any part of the animal. So how does that impact? Sorry? So the survivor is also cholesterol. Right? And by the way, you see liver when it's mixed with onions and kishmak. That's not what this liver looked or smelled like. So Zok Gemara, it's interesting that you bring up that question. Liver is less expensive than meat. Right. But liver is less expensive than meat per pound. So there was a famous story when the Taz got married. Who did the Taz marry? Did he marry the Bach's daughter? I could be married the Bach's daughter. And in the Naden, this is how I shouldn't say petty, but in the Naden it was mentioned that the shver is going to eat kest by the shver, and the shver is going to serve him meat every day. It was not stark. It was going to lay in him, right? And what happened is his shver couldn't afford meat. He only gave him liver, and because of that, he wasn't a chas. He didn't care. Because of that, he wanted to make sure that there won't be a tfi on the shver. So he took the shver to the Torah, saying, "You promised me meat, and you're giving me liver." And because he wanted the Bezdin to paskin bedafka that it has a din of basar, so that the Bezdin shall paskin that his shver is doing 100% right. I don't remember what happened, but I think they stayed married. So let's look at Rashi's second shot. So let's say it means that Reb Shimon matla he ate it. So how does that impact what they would paskin on less than the kazayis? So Rashi explains. Reb Shimon was matbalit, held that it had chiyas to it. If it has chiyas, Zok Rashi, let's refer to a Gemara we learned. We learned that you write to Sheyavri, you should have a kazayis basar kodim shchita. Remember we said that you have to cut out from the base of shchita. So you see that something to give chiyas has to be at least a share of a kazayis. So Reb Shimon Rabbi matbalei because he holds it has chiyas. If it has chiyas, then it has to be at least a kazayis. And Reb Chia said no. Zarkla, he never ate liver. He didn't consider it healthy. So therefore, he would hold even less than that. So based on the Rashi second shot, it's exactly the opposite. It's Reb Chia who would be matter of behema if only a drop of its liver remained, and it's Reb Shimon who would hold that the liver has to be a complete share. But at least it explains why he just says it zark lamatbala, because we're talking about the actual liver of a kosher animal, would they eat it or not? Hopa Musa, there was an army that came to Pumbedisa. Now, when an army comes, everybody runs away because the Goyish army generally didn't bring with them good tidings. So Orku, Rabba of Rabbi Yosef. Rabba and Rabbi Yosef escaped, they ran out of town. And on their way running out of town, Hagabu, Reb Zera bumped into them. Amalu Arakari, you guys who like to run away, let me tell you a halacha on your way out. I'm running for my life. I don't have time now for a halacha. So we're going to soon see why did they pick. This is not the greatest and most convenient time to start hearing a halacha, but we're going to see why. Kazayis she'amru b'makay mara. That we said there has to be a kazayis of the liver remaining. It's b'makay mara. In order so that we could try to visualize it, is we know that there is a diaphragm, which is a piece of muscle that separates the cavity of the animal in half. In front of the diaphragm is the heart and the lungs. Behind the diaphragm, so the behind the diaphragm is the stomachs and the intestines and the liver. And the liver is actually stuck to that diaphragm wall. That's how it's supported. It's actually stuck to the diaphragm wall. That's on the north end, closer to the front of the animal. Closer to the back of the animal, the end of the liver has a mora sticking out of it. I think it's called the spleen. So the question is, the kazayis that remains has to be the kazayis that's connected to the spleen. You have to have a kazayis of meat connected to the spleen. It's from where it hangs from, meaning there has to be kazayis remaining where it touches the diaphragm. Amar Papa, therefore, we don't know which one, so we need both. Hilchach b'inin kazayis b'makam mara u'b'inin kazayis b'makam shichaya. So the question, what was the urgency about this halacha that they're escaping and they should stop to listen to this halacha? So I saw in the Mesivta, he brings down, I don't know who he brings down from, but he brings down a very nice word. Reb Zera was trying to tell them, you're running away. Why? Because you're afraid that they're not going to let you learn Torah when they come. And because of that, you want to run away where you'll be able to learn Torah with ease and not have to struggle to learn Torah and put yourself in danger to learn Torah and learn Torah amongst the difficult situation. Zokra Papa, let me talk about the liver and the mora. The liver is only going to succeed, only going to survive if it's connected to the mora. And the liver is the liver could give chios. So therefore, I was telling him a message that if you want to steiger learning, you should steiger learning bedavka where it's bitter, bedavka where it's tough. Maybe you shouldn't run away, and maybe you should stay there and you should learn. It should be misliach. Zok tehedek gemara. Boy Rabbi Yirmiyah mislaket mahu. What if you don't have a kezayis of liver in one place? You have a little piece of liver here, a little bit of there, but it's connected. What would the be? Or kurtzura mahu. What if it was a kazayis, but it was like a long, thin strip of liver? Or boy Rashi, kazayis maruded mahu. If it's like really literally like a thin string, mahu what would be the lacha? Well, there's actually another problem that I have. You're not going to have a kazayis. If you need to have a kazayis for mokam echad, and just a little drop touch to the tchol, that's the problem. Problem is you have to have a little bit of a mass there, not just a little touch and then you see you coming out of it. What does the article touch maru does? Flatten out. And the kurtzua? Less, it's also flattened out, but less flattened out. Right, so isn't that flattened out? So I think maruda is even more thinned out. That's as much like dak moy the Rashi says. So tomorrow take all these things will be a supplement. Zok to Gemara Baiter. Boy minei Reb Zreika merabami. Nidal de la kaved. What happens if the kaved is completely disconnected, it's hanging out? Umuura bitar pashe. And it just connected to the diaphragm. The tar pashe is the diaphragm. Mahu. Omer lei the dildel zeh en yedeh mahu. I don't understand why you're clearing why there should be a problem. If it has to be connected to the mara is connected, just that the liver is hanging a little bit off the diaphragm. And so it's partly severed from there, but it's still hanging out of it. So therefore, I don't see what the problem is. It should not be treif at all. Haraya shenikva. Now we're going to get into the lungs. Haraya shenikva. Rabbi Shmuel v'Rabasi the Omri. Karma ilo, amila karma tesa. Once again, there's an upper membrane and there's a lower membrane, and the question is which one has to be punctured in order for it to be a treif. And we're going to see that it has to be both, because one of the conditions that they find sometimes is the lung has a bubble on it. You know, if the sidewall of your tire has a bubble coming out of it, you need to replace it so you shouldn't get a blowout. But a lung that has a bubble coming out of it is going to be kosher, because that's a sign that the inner krum was punctured. So air is escaping, but it's being held in by the outer krum, and that's kosher. So here there's a shaila, which is the important one. Lamaskana, we're going to hold that it's both. Omer Rabbi Yosy bar Menyume, Omer Rabbi Nachman, v'simonech kituna devarda demoncha bereya. What's a simon for the lower membrane, meaning the membrane that's right on the lungs themselves? It's like a red rose, because it's like a reddish sheath that it's in, that the reya is sitting in. That's what it would look like, because it's red. Zaktamar pshita, it's pasha to us. Inkivi law will inkiv tasa. If the outer membrane was ruptured or punctured, but the inner membrane was not punctured, tasa megan, the bottom membrane would protect the lung, and it wouldn't be considered leaking, and it would be kosher kidarabba. The Amrabba, Kai Reya the Iglid, if a Reya, meaning Shanital Kruma Elyon Vovshat, it was skinned, Iglid is lotion of skin, Kahina Sumka, and that looks like a red krum, because that's what it looks like when the first layer comes off. Sheira, it would still be kosher. What about Inkav Tasa, Inkav Ilah? What if the inner one was punctured but the outer one wasn't? Do you say Megan or Eloi Megan? Will the outer membrane protect it and say that it's not a treifa? Kaliki bar Ravacha Ravina, Chadam or Loi Megan, the Chadam or Megan, the Hilchas are Megan. So that's where we hold Megan, and therefore, if either one of the membranes are intact, even if there's a big bubble in the outer membrane because the inner membrane is leaking, that would still be kosher. Because Rabbi Yosef, Dom Rabbi Yosef, Hi Reya the Avsha. What if when you blow the lung up, you hear hissing? So there's a leak. You can't find the leak. We deal with this on air conditioning coils all the time. And actually, the answer that the Gemara gives, we actually sometimes do in extreme cases as well, if we cannot find the leak. So high rate option, I'll tell you what we do. High rate option, if you have a lung that you hear hissing, but you can't pinpoint where the leak is. If you can tell exactly where it's hissing from, and you're not sure if it's an internal leak from one chamber to another, or if it's leaking to the outside and therefore it's treifa, mosvino lagatva, we use soap bubbles, and that's going to be an option here as well. Or they can use a feather so that a little bit of air that blows makes it flutter. It's like people putting tissue over an event. It's not blowing enough, right? Or roika is soap bubbles, otherwise known as saliva. Oi gilo, or gilo's kash is a straw, so it'll blow easily. Imevat vitza, if it moves or if it bubbles, treifa. It'll be a treifa. Be like share because that means there's no leak. But ilo yadinan hecha afsha. What if you hear a hissing but you can't pinpoint even where it is? So what do? That's a good question. We're going to see soon. Ma'isinan mitichlas adamaya shuri. You take lukewarm water or tepid water, umoisvinan la begava, and you blow up the whole lung and you dip it into a tank. I once had to dip a whole air conditioning coil, filled up a bathtub with water and dipped it in because we couldn't find the leak. And what we found was the actual copper pipe was leaking. Good old Chinese copper. Stuff was leaking right through the wall of the copper pipe. So and you dip it right into this vat of water. Now, don't dip it into warm water, the kavitzi, or the kavtzi. And Rashi says the kavtzi means it'll shrink and it'll seal the hole and it will give you a false kosher. The kariri in cold water, or the matrici, it hardens and that would cause it to bust. Right? I always tell my guys, if at 400 psi you can't find a leak, put it in 500, then you'll find many leaks. Right? So it'll pop it. Ella ma'isvinan b'pshuri. You have to put it into tepid water. V'napchina and you blow it up. If you see bubbling, treifa. V'loik sheira. Frank Mati, where's that noise coming from if it's not bubbling? Because tasa inkev, it's a simon that the inner membrane was punctured. Eloina ninkev, and the air you hear is rushing from the lungs into that bubble that it's going to be blowing up. That's the air that's escaping from the lung. So you hear the hissing sound, but it's staying inside because of the outer membrane, and therefore you don't see the leak. And it would be kosher in this case because we learned that either one is making. Gufa, Omarava, Hireya, the Iglit Kahina Sumka. So we said it's missing its outer membrane, it only has its inner membrane. Ksher would be kosher. Yomarava, Reya Shehedima Miktsasa. What part of it got red? Ksher it will be kosher. Kula, if it all became red, treifa, it's going to be treifa. It's a sign that it's infected, I guess. Amler Avinu Larava, Miktsasa my taima. Why are you saying that if only part of it is red, it's kosher? It's also an infection because the hadrabari, because it's going to get better. The infection can be healed. So I bazai kula nami hadrabari. So just because it's all red, or you should say it should get better. Milai Tanya, didn't we learn? Vishar shkotzim u'remoshim. Now we know it's also to make a chabura on Shabbos. Now there are some insects that have a very hard shell, banging it won't make a chabura. The other ones, if they're very soft, if you touch them, they'll make a chabura. So v'shar shkotim remosim, the ones that have a hard shell, there it's not a chabura achiyetzim hemdam until they actually bleed, because it's very hard to make a chabura in them. I'm sorry, forget it. The ones that are very soft skin, a little tap, you'll already see bruising. That doesn't necessarily mean a chabura. It's not considered a chabura to be over for making a chabura on Shabbos unless you actually puncture the skin and it's bleeding. Just reddening below the surface, that wouldn't qualify as a chabura. So if that's the case, here too, if the lungs became red, why should there be a problem? Let's see Rashi. Mila Tanya Shtarshkotim or Ramoshim, Ketanim, the small little insects, going tzvardim like frogs, V'doimelen sha'ayrin rach. They have a soft shell. Chutz mishmoina shirotzim sha'ayrin kasha. We're talking about all shirotzim besides the 8 ones that are known to have a hard shell. Einoi chayiv aleim b'Shabbos mishum chayvel. You would not be mechuyev for making a chabura on them on Shabbos until an actual drop of blood comes out of them. Even though when you hit them, they do become red in that area. Ein zelakusa. That's not called a chabura. It reddens very easily. So until it actually bleeds, it wouldn't be a chabura. So let's apply that to lungs as well. Legabe trefus. Reddening should not be considered a problem by lungs because they get red very easily. So why would you say it's a treifa, even if they're all red? And if you're going to tell me that we compare them to the shmoy nishrotim, that merely reddening is a chabura, the tanya nitra adam alpha bishalayotza. Well, then if that's the case, then why are you making a distinction between if they all became red or if only part of it became red? Ela loishna doesn't make a difference. Now it's interesting because Rashi says loishna means the ben kula v'miktasa kshera. Tosfos says exactly the opposite. He says loishna, and they're both going to be puzzle. So let's learn like Rashi's pshat. See, Tosfos appears rach loishno treifa. So he had the kashas and other things, but Kuntr's pirish loishno kshera could come on. Rab Alvas Rabbeinu Bar Rebbe Avin Hayamoida. So it seems like the oilam was moida to Rashi Lukula.
We're still talking about a niku?
Reddening of the lung.
We're just talking about
red
an
spot.
infection, or we're talking about a niku?
No, infection. We're not talking about a niku. Niku is possible.
This is just an add-on to the halacha.
That's right.
Mishnah.
What if part of the reya dried out? Treifa will be treifa. How dry does it have to be that we would consider it a treifa because of that? It's got to be so dry that if you run your nail across it, it will crumble and flake from your nail running over it or pushing on it. This is consistent with Rabbi Yosy ben Amishulem, who holds that we don't consider something dried out until it's that dry that it'll crumble when you put pressure on it with your nail. The Tanya Ezoi Hiyavesha, what is considered so dark, so dried out? If it will get a hole and it won't even bleed. What are we talking about? We're talking about, let's say, the ear of a bechor that got dried out. Is it called a mum? If it's so dried out that you run your finger over it and it cracks, that's a dead ear, and that would be considered a mum. That's what he said. That's the Tanakama. Rabbi Yosy ben Amishulem says it's got to be even drier than that in order for it to be considered a mum. So talk to Gemara. If you're saying that by a lung, it has to be so dry in order for it to be a treifa, as with the fechas b'tzipayin, that'll be like the shittas yochid and Rabbi Yosy ben Amishulem. So no, afilu tema rabbanan. Could be we hold like the rabbanan that by oizum b'chor it doesn't have to be that dry. By the lungs it has to be that dry, but not by the oizum b'chor. What's the difference? The ear is outside in the air. So if it's going to reach the point already where it's tinakiv anyway dam, even though it's not that dried out, it's going to eventually dry it all the way because the air that's impacting that wound is going to kill it. Therefore, like Hajabari, Alvared like a shalat bavira, it's sealed in the cavity of the animal. So even if there's no dam coming out of it, but it could still fix itself. Hajabari, and unless it's that dry that it crumbles, it wouldn't be a trefa. Amarava, Hyrei the kaima gildy. There's patches on it. Rashi says it's like pieces of blood. It looks like, or uchmi black patches, or chazusa. It's some discoloring in different little patches. Shera, the lung will still be kosher. The behemoth will be kosher. Amar meim Rava ein makifin bibui. What happens if you had a bubble? Now, what would happen if you check the lungs and there's a hole in the lung, but you're not sure did this hole come after the shechita? It fell around with sharp objects, and you choshed something punctured it, or was this when it was alive and it's a treifa? So what you could do is you could compare two lungs that have a hole in them to see if it looks the same, if the skin around it looks the same, because it would look differently if the hole came after the animal was killed versus if the hole was there when the animal was still alive. But what happens if you have this bubble that popped, right? The bubble is a sign that air got in between the two membranes, and the bubble popped. Now you're not sure if the bubble popped while the animal was alive, or if the bubble popped when they're handling the lung. There ain't makifim bui. You can't compare it to another one that popped to see how to compare it, because the buoy changes colors a lot, and you wouldn't be able to tell by comparing it to another one. Vamarava, hanetarti uni. This is a very big sugi. We're going to have to leave it for tomorrow. Sirchas in a lung, growth to come out of the lung. That's a big deal. Between glad kosher, not glad kosher. I'll just read the Gemara, but we'll start from here tomorrow. Vamarava, hanetarti uni. Now the lung is made up of a whole bunch of lobes. We're going to see on one side there's 4 lobes, on the other side there's 3 lobes. So the halacha is less lubadika. If there's a sircha on it, you cannot be boidik. You cannot be, there's no bdika for it, and therefore it'll be puzzle. That's only if lobe 1 was connected to lobe 3. So as it moves, it's going to rip open. What if lobe 1 got connected to lobe 2 with a sircha? That's how it grows, and there wouldn't be a concern. This is a very serious sugya. It's the whole sugya of lungs, which determine if it's glad kosher or not glad kosher. But we'll get into the details tomorrow. Do we eat it as a lung or we eat it as a hot dog?